Okay, everybody, please find your seats. The most exciting side event of this year's Arctic Frontiers is about to start, so please bring your friends from the coffee machine and come in to join us. Okay, welcome everybody. So let's jump into it. License to operate the Arctic energy transition, and this is essentially about, apart from geopolitics, which is also interconnected, very much what's been talked about here in Tromsø for the last 4 days. So what will it take to realize this transition, including in the Arctic? And is there, what we play on, is there a license to operate for this to succeed? And this we mean in the broader sense of the word. Public acceptance, acceptable use of nature, well-defined licensing processes, a business model for associated industry, and so on and so forth. Meaning the considerations of competing interests. As we heard in all the panels, it's quite difficult in general, and it's very hard to be concise about it. So we will give it a try here. So let's start with zooming a little bit in on public opinion to set some context. So I give the word to political scientist, Professor Andre Tvinnereim from the University of Bergen. Trends in Norwegian public opinion on energy technologies and transition. So please, Andre, take it away.
Thank you, Tor. It's great to be here, and it's really been an enjoyable and also interesting. It's been an interesting conference. We have some difficulties with a lot of things, and one of the things that may not be the most difficult one is the energy transition. It is a challenge, but it is also it gives us a lot of opportunity. I will talk about the energy transition in the Arctic. So what we have in the announcement for today is this, these questions about whether what will it take to get this energy transition going, to go from fossil fuels to renewables. Is there a license to operate for this to succeed? And as Tor said, I'm particularly interested in the questions about what Norwegians think are reasonable, suitable ways to make this energy transition happen. It's not just about getting rid of some fuels and putting some other fuels in. The systems are quite different. So this is a systemic type of transition. And also it's interesting for me, and hopefully also for you, to see how opinion has changed over time. To answer some of these questions, I will use data from the Norwegian Citizen Panel, which is a research-only panel opinion polling panel that's been going on since 2014. So it's more than a decade old, where we ask people about various political topics 3 times per year. And then it's only used for research, although we try to, of course, get into the media and disseminate our findings in fora like this. So one of the questions that we have asked for quite some time is this, whether people agree or disagree that more onshore power, wind power, or offshore wind power should be built in Norway. And then people get the chance of responding on a 7-point classical Likert scale. And so this goes back to 2014, where there weren't that many wind turbines built in Norway. And as you see from the data, most people thought this was a good idea to build more of this back about 10 years ago. And then over time, we see that people have grown more skeptical, especially on the onshore segment, whereas offshore wind is still something that has a fairly comfortable majority in favor of it. So that's the trend. So who are the people who like this and dislike it? Well, you may have some ideas about the city people and the education, and in fact, we do find some effects here when we look at the background data. So one thing we see that women are slightly more in favor of offshore wind. So offshore wind is what I'm showing here. We don't see any age effect really, but we see that people with higher education are significantly more in favor of offshore wind. And then we see quite clear regional effects. So the dotted line is the average for Oslo, and then we see all the other regions have people less in favor, especially in the south and the north, in the Arctic where we are now. There is more, but also the west where I'm based, so people are less in favor of offshore wind. Okay, so that's the trend and some of the demographics, but we're also interested in other types of energy, and we did last year just a comparative study asking people similar questions about a number of energy sources. Nuclear, because that's has suddenly become a thing in the public debate. Hydro, which has been there for a century or more. And then the wind question again, and then gas-fired, just to have a reference, because that's something that's not big in Norway, but it's been discussed back and forth for some decades. More about 30 years ago than now, but for reference. So what we see for the data here is that hydroelectric power, for example, the second highest, people love that. It wasn't always so, but now that's just fantastic. Everybody is in favor of that. Nuclear has perhaps a surprising support, and I'll get back to that. And then I think when it comes to the onshore wind, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that we actually have, it's almost like a camel shape, 2 bumps, right? So there is very strong opposition for some, and then there are some people who are in favor, but the middle is fairly empty. So you see this kind of bifurcation of the opinion, which is peculiar for wind. But just looking at the nuclear, and the fantastic thing about nuclear power is that we see a tremendous gender gap. So men in Norway are much more in favor of nuclear power than women. And we also see a slight age effect that younger people are at least slightly more in favor, whereas the older people are not so much in favor. We can get back to why that is. This could be what people remember, or it could be all kinds of things. So we can debate that later. Okay, but the energy transition is not just about technology. It's also about market integration. It's about how to use this. It's a new way of approaching electricity. So, of course, we need to electrify pretty much everything, and we have a lot of intermittent power. So I think we also need to think about how the electricity market works. And this has been controversial in Norway over the past couple of years. We see increasing interconnection between Norway and the EU, and Norwegians love to play the game of energy prices. They love to have these variable prices that change from one hour to the next and go up and down. And this is something that's just really... People have chosen not to have stable contracts like in Denmark. It's like almost like playing at the casino for the electricity prices, and this is very exciting. I think a lot of people find that, and a lot of people are very angry about this. Why is this important? Well, I think there is a potential in the energy transition to integrate Norwegian dispatchable power, where you can produce when you want, it's renewable, and then you can balance off intermittent power from the continent or just from Norwegian wind power. And this is good for the environment because you can really decarbonize the electricity system. It makes the system more efficient, and it makes it possible for Norway to sell expensive power and buy it back when it's cheap. But, as I said, this is really controversial. And what we do see when we ask people about what they think about whether the electricity prices should be determined by the market or by supply and demand, which is pretty much the same, or by the government, we do see that people tend to favor fixed prices that are set by the government rather than the market. In a way, we already have this with a support scheme for domestic users. So certainly, I think there is a challenge here to our market-based power system in Norway, if you look at public opinion. And we can talk more about that in the debate, but I think this is a warning sign for the energy transition in Norway. So if we just go back to our questions, we see that when it comes to the aspects of the energy transition that Norwegians oppose or support, we see that onshore wind is something that has declined in popularity over time, whereas offshore is still fairly popular. We have fairly clear distinctions between urban, rural, and educational variables. Nuclear has come up like this wild card, and we think that the electricity market is in political trouble. Will this keep going? Well, will offshore wind become like onshore wind? Will people get less in favor of that as they see more of it coming? And what about nuclear? Is that something that people like now because they don't know much about it, and that we will get opposition once we get the first concrete plans? This is why we will keep answering these questions and report back to you next time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Andra. Okay, then we are well warmed up. Yeah, more or less. Okay, so targets and obligations and ambitions for the energy transition, they are set at the national and international level. But the specific implementation, the building of infrastructure, the area use, that is very much local. So we're now going to have two panels that reflect these two aspects, and we're going to start where the action is, the local setting. And to get some action in here, I think if we don't waste our time totally, we're going to open up for the audience a little bit towards the end of both panels. And then the contract with the audience is that you have to relate to the discussion going and discussion up here. So you have to comment and ask for what's going on up here. So, without further ado, zooming in on the local issues, I invite Mona Benjaminsen, Mayor of Karlsøy Municipality from the Labour Party. Please find a seat. And to balance it, Geir Inge Sivertsen, Mayor of Senja Municipality of the Conservative Party. Maja Seuterich, Political Editor of Nordlys newspaper. And Torjar Andreas Olsen, Professor at the University of Tromsø. Okay, so we warm up with a question that goes to all of you. You can answer it the way you like, preferably short, and then I will have one question individually to each of you that you can comment then on afterwards. So you are all in public positions one way or the other. We're considering both facts and public opinion, as we saw, and communicating this to your electorate, your local community, or your readers, and in an Arctic context. So can you reflect a little bit to the audience on your role in this, and of course on the energy transition? Mona, you want to have a start?
Yes. As the leader of the municipal council, it's my job to make sure that all elected politicians have competence in the matter, because we know everything that concerns interventions in big nature areas will be conflicted. It always is. So it was important for us to get some competence, for us first and foremost, because we are the ones who's going to have meetings with people, with local residents. And we also have to make sure that we have create areas for us to meet local people, to also make sure they know what this concerns. We also had some new regulations that we also waited for that would make it possible for us to have, during the phase, times to say no, to stop and consider if we were going to go forward with it or not. But most of all, it's our responsibility to make sure that we have competence in the matter and open also for the, opinions from local residents.
Geir Inge?
First, the situation in my municipality of Senja is that we have a very strong fish farming and fishing industry, and they have for the last 10 years reported that they will need quite big amount of new energy to develop their industry. And we also have the Green Shift, which has the ambition to electrify the fishing, the fleet. So the main problem in my municipality is not the energy production itself, it's the problem of capacity on the existing network. Mostly the regional and local distribution grid, which is too weak to supply the industry. So that's the main background of the problem. And we don't have the experience as Mona, because she has already started some wind power project in her municipality, and there is some stakeholders now try to do the same in Senja. And we see the same as Tvinnereim showed on his survey, that is a very strongly, the majority of the people are strongly against. Yeah. So that is the problem. So we of course like to also produce more energy in my municipality, because we are a quite big user of energy, and then I try to tell my political colleagues and also the inhabitants of Senja that we cannot only demand others to produce the energy we are needed, we also have to contribute ourselves.
I think I'm going to return to you in the next question a little bit more in detail. So thank you. Maya, how does it look from the newspaper side?
So the role of the newspaper in every democracy is to not be conflict shy and open up the spaces for the good discussions, hopefully, to be had about this issue. In Norway, things are quite complicated in Norway for many reasons, which we probably will move further into eventually. But in Norway, we have this tendency to be surprised by counter movements, which is really weird because they always do exist, and we do have a huge polarization between central government and local municipalities, and also how people perceive the policies made in central government and how they affect their own lives and spaces they inhabit. And I think that's the major issue for us, because counter movements will always happen. Our job as a newspaper is to shed some light on the conflicts of interest that do happen, the clashes that do happen, to have the ear to the ground, but also to provoke this debate, because we cannot shy away from it, and we cannot keep it under wraps and just hope that it will go over by itself, and as long as you have a decree from the central government, everything is going to be fine. It's not.
So Torjar, University of Tromsø and regional academia, where do you find this in the public outreach, or even in your teaching?
Well, I think it's important for UiT houses a lot of different perspectives, as it should, and disagreements, and as any university should. I think for the Center for Sami Studies, where I'm located, it is important we work to promote and highlight indigenous involvement, indigenous perspectives, research and knowledge with indigenous perspectives, and this means also promoting that one. Whatever that means, that is not one thing, it's in plural, so to speak. But I must say that when it comes to these discussions that we see here, I think it's fair and fine to say that I'm from here. I'm a Sami and Norwegian from here, from this region, and with a deep concern and love for people and communities and land here. And this means that it's easy to be worried about what's going on when it comes to the disagreements and so on. Disagreements is fine, but how we deal with that is a reason to worry, I must say. And I think for parts of what we do now is to find new ways of sharing, producing knowledge, experiences, finding new ways of having dialogue between peoples, and ways of getting knowledge out of dialogue with industry, with scholars, with teachers, with people, local communities, and so on. I think that's an interesting part. And finally, what I've learned a lot from within indigenous research is an indigenous scholar in New Zealand said some critical questions to ask for research, but I think can use in anyways. I mean, we should ask always the question, who makes the decisions? Who benefits from the decisions? And who defines what is important? And whether it's research or industry or teaching or research, I think it's a fair question.
Okay, so let's go a little bit to who makes the decision, at least to some extent. So Mona, at Karlsøy, you actually had a major development of wind power. So can you say something about how that came about? Public acceptance,
that was a
support,
bit
resistance?
Before I was a mayor in 2012.
Yeah, but now you have the honors.
There were more conflict with the Sami people back then than there is now. Now that conflict has solved itself, really. But
Why?
Because they have dialogue.
Yeah.
You know, before we went public, they had meetings, listens. What is important for the reindeer herding? What is most important for them, and to work with, not against, and take time to listen. And Tromskraft did that very well. But the problem this time is not the local residents are positive to explore the possibility, and also to trust us as the council to also the willingness to follow the face and may say no if we find that the impact would be bigger than the benefits, and trust us to make that decision. But this time, the controversy was with, interest organization that had no...
You're talking about the second phase possibly coming up now?
Yes,
yeah.
the second phase. That is the problem, because they're not local, they're not residents, they are organizations, and they really need some competence as well. I'm sorry to say it. They really need to have the new regulations, also the laws that this is not the first time we had made plans that had controversy. We also had coastal zone plans, for fish farming. So we've been in this situation before, so we know how to follow the process. But some of these organizations just don't get what the process means, the new regulations. So they're just making a lot of noise, which the way this plays out in social media is very interesting. But we've been through this before, both me and Geringer, we have been through this before. But so we found that a lot of people that were interested and wanted to learn more, what could this mean for us? What could this create? A new industry didn't get to be heard as much as we wanted to, because some of the organizations really made a lot of noise.
So Geringer, moving from slightly north of here to slightly south of here, resistance or complexity seems to be the case for Senja as well. But you guys are yet to have your first eventual establishment of wind power. You have had bidders or potential planners, but can you say something about the state of things in the public debate?
Yeah, it's the same as Mona is describing in the opinion among the people. And I think there is a quite big lack of knowledge or understanding. Or I'm quite impressed, in fact, of the people of Senja, because most of them are already experts of energy production, environmental impact assessment, economy. So that's because they
have a good mayor.
No, because the information they get around this installation is totally wrong. So we have a huge problem to educate or grown-up education for how is this working. And I know it's controversial because it's also challenging the nature, of course. No doubt of that. So it's really difficult to have the correct information to the people. This Monday, in fact, I was invited to one local village, which will be part of this if it's happened. And then I could explain, like Mona says, how is the real planned process working in
the legal framework, the real practicalities.
Yeah. And then that was a really good meeting, because there was no of this organization there, and they were interested to learn about how is the planned process. Yeah. So I think we have to do more of that.
Maya, you had a comment?
This is kind of where academia and media and politics differ. Dialogue works when it works. But then both parties need to be interested in making it work. When it comes to these kind of interest organizations that Mona is mentioning, it's not in their interest that the dialogue works. It's in their interest that the dialogue fails. And it's also sometimes in the interest of the political parties that the dialogue fails, as we are seeing in Norway today. In a couple of hours, we will probably have an announcement that the government is going to disassemble on the back of the EU regulations that need to be implemented into our system regarding energy conservation and renewable energy. So it's all well and fine, but if we are going to do a huge renewable effort in Norway, we will have to balance these issues. Somebody will have to make some extremely unpopular decisions, and will have to pay the price at the voting booths. And who is going to be willing to do that? Is it going to be right party, or is it going to be Labour Party? No party will go out into this year's election and say, yes, we will build more wind power on land.
Yeah, so as I literally read it, but I could be wrong, your newspaper, and particularly you in your commentary, you don't seem too super optimistic about this thing. So how do you foresee, and how do you think your readers foresee the present and the near future in this respect?
Let's just look at this one huge industry kind of effort that this government has made regarding renewable energy. So they want to electrify Melkøya, which is this huge gas installation, biggest point of CO2 emissions on land in Norway. The way they've come about it is to say we will focus on putting electricity into this huge Equinor installation, which will make us produce more gas for the European market. They scarcely consulted Sami parliament. They did have some initial support from the businesses in the Finnmark area, because they are hoping to get a boost from the power electricity capacity being increased. But they didn't do any groundwork. So they are pushing this EU and Paris Agreement and these huge international agreements ahead of themselves, instead of anchoring it in the grassroots. And that's the issue.
But arguably, isn't Melkøya a little bit of a red herring? It's a one-off thing. We will never have one such plant or one such decision again for the green transition, I believe.
But it's a red herring if you are out of the actual habitation of human beings in Norway.
Okay.
Because people live in their own communities. They do not live in Paris agreements. They do not live in governmental agreements. They have ownership to their own lives. And this is what I'm trying to say. You have to put your ears to the ground and actually anchor your decision in the existence of human beings in this country. Otherwise, you will have these movements and counter-movements that will constantly be polarizing. So our newspaper is not inherently against green energy.
But you tend to.
We are not.
No.
We are against the bad decision-making that will make interest conflicts in this particular part of the country even more polarized, which probably Torje can say something about also in regards to the indigenous peoples.
Yeah, Mona, and then I think I have Torje. Yes?
I wouldn't say that we not have our ear to the ground, but there's some laziness also. I'm not talking political laziness, but we have had, I'm going back to it, a coastal zone plan, and when that was finished in the council, there were no new localities for fish farming, and a lot of people that I've never heard of before called me, what happened? And, you know, this is very important for our community. We need this. We need this work. You know, we need this. And I said, but where were you? Why didn't you participate? If this was important for you, the people you hear from is they who are against. Always them. And some government agencies I don't want to talk about. But that's the people you hear from. So in this, as Geir Inge says, you know, he has to engage the local industry to make them have a voice as well. Because also, again, the way this sometimes, I'm not talking about the media, I'm talking about social media, the way this plays out, you're better off just sitting, quiet in your own little boat and not talk about it, because you had get shut off if you have an opinion publicly. But you need to engage stakeholders that this is important to. When we had fucking one, what happened was, we have big fish industry also in our municipality, and they had, better conditions now because the stability of the power is that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
So there are important stakeholders, and we need to get them also to the table to talk about their needs and their wants.
So Geir Inge was just a short comment? Or?
No, I can wait.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now that I have my ear to the ground and it's a little bit warm. So Torjard, for an outsider, it seems that the regional public debate on contested issues, for example this one, but also other stuff, can get a little bit heated, not to say, well, even ugly. And particularly when indigenous stakeholders are involved. Can you say a little bit about this, how you perceive it, how you can even become part of it?
Well, it's what we have seen over the last few years is the increase in the polarization, as we mentioned before, that people go to the outskirts when it comes to opinions about these issues. And especially the whole wind industry topic has been a key in this, and especially on the Finnmark area, but also in these municipalities, as you would know, and elsewhere. And we had a big Supreme Court decision in Fosen in Trøndelag over a few years ago. All of these make things complicated. And what we see in public debate now, and let's remain in Finnmark first off, we see that there's a big distinction between how to talk about this, between talking about wind power industry or energy industry as something that will solve the big problems for local communities. And many, both Sami and Norwegians and others along the coast especially, would be really happy to see that happening. Whereas you have especially connected to reindeer herding, there's a big important fight to defend the rights of indigenous reindeer herding and so on, in that sense, Sami rights. And if you put that on top, and this is where it gets complicated, if you put that on top of like more than a century of Norwegianization, assimilation, colonization, and perhaps most importantly, the silencing of everything regarding Sami.
But even stating that perspective sometimes would be controversial, I believe.
Yes, and that is that's what I was saying, that if you have that as the bottom of this, then talking about these issues have so many complex layers of shame, of anger, of distrust. And this is where we move to what I think is one of the key tendencies and problems in this setting is we see a decrease when it comes to trust. I mean, Norway has always been a country where there's a high level of trust, and that trust is now being contested, a part of this, and complicating that debate. So this means that both the political debate and election regarding the Norwegian parliament coming this fall, and most particularly, I would say, the upcoming election for the Sami parliament will most probably be ugly. I don't need to be much of a truth sayer in saying that this will be an ugly debate regarding this.
Okay.
So my hope is that the politicians show great responsibility in also saying that this is complicated. We don't know the answer. We need more people, both editors, politicians, and scholars and others who say that I think this is complicated.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what to do.
Just a spring of thought. So maybe both politicians and also media commentators can sometimes shy away from the easy points, like comparing Listhaug to Trump and so on. I don't see it adding much to the debate. Geir Inge, and then Maya.
I think we also have it's another dimension regarding the political energy debate in Norway. And the fact is, right now we have extreme low energy prices in this region. There will be no incentives or few incentives for any company to build out more energy production. And in the same times, people which are living here says that we can solve everything if you cut cables to EU or Europe, and we should not connect the transmission lines between the northern part and the southern part. So, in fact, some of us are saying that we are satisfied to be isolated in the northern part without any possibility for development.
And if I understand it correctly, Senja is literally on the end of the line.
Yeah. Even worse, we are in the end of the line of the distribution line, so the distribution grid. So So that is the really discussions. How can we explain the people in North that if we are heading for new investment, for development, then we have to explore new possibilities for energy.
I would just like to remind the audience and the moderator here that the media in Norway are actually quite good at the job they're doing. We have many hundred newspapers in Norway that are alive and thriving in these local communities that are affected by different interests from different industries, from different political points of view and organizations who would like to kind of claim a piece of their land. The diversity in the opinions in Norwegian media is actually, you cannot find it anywhere else in Europe. We have a local media that functions well. We have the media in the central parts of Norway that covers the entire range of the political spectre. So I think that if we are to be a knowledge-based society, which we are, media is not your enemy, but the media does amplify the debates that are important to people. And people don't sit and read EU energy package framework. They don't sit and read Paris Agreement. They do need to have this explained. They do need to be informed, and they do need to be informed on it on their own terms, which these organizations that are using social media unopposed are extremely successful at. We have to remember that. The social media is not edited. There's nobody taking responsibility for what's coming out of it. So you should applaud media in Norway.
Okay. So anybody who wants to follow up on that one? Okay, you got the applause. So we're in northern Norway, and I'm from Bergen, so we can have a go at Oslo. This is always popular. So Andra, he presented the highly educated Oslo citizen as the prototype wind and offshore wind enthusiast, whereas those more directly concerned, even with having the potential workplaces involved, we are more negative. But it seems to be a particular case here in Tromsø in the resistance. Some of the fiercest opposition in your guys' regions are urban people from Tromsø having their holiday houses in the vicinities. We want to comment on that?
Yes, I will. This is the same people that had very much to say about the coastal zone plan, and you know they have their first name dot, second name at un.no and uit.no. Okay. These are the professors with cabins. Yes, I'm sorry to say. And they because it's the weekend, they want this is going to be. Idyllic. This is going to be, relaxing. We don't want to see the sea farming locations. We don't have to see the windmills. We want to, this is our holiday, and this make my quality weekend worse.
And of course, they would be the most knowledgeable about process.
Come again?
They would be the most knowledgeable about process.
I wouldn't say that.
Oh, no? Okay, but because this is typically what you see, at least in Bergen.
I get emails from them. I wouldn't say they're knowledgeable. They have not competence about the process. I wouldn't say that.
Okay, good.
No, sorry.
Depressing. Geir Inge, you want to have a go?
Yeah, it's more or less the same situation in Senja. Mona is better to explain that than me, but...
I'm loving the agreement across the aisle here.
No, but
we're going to have a centrist government pretty soon here in Norway.
I think that is understandable because, and maybe I had done the same if I was living in Tromsø and had a cabin in the beautiful island of Karlsøy. Maybe. So I think that is normal. But the fact that the people in Oslo, compared with the people along the coast, is more positive to the offshore wind, for example. That is also understandable because the coastal people, they are afraid for area conflicts when you start to build out the offshore wind. And when we have discussed that in my municipality, because the fishing area is very narrow in this region, so if you put up a lot of wind turbines offshore, then you can have other problems and other conflicts. So.
Torjard, you had a comment, and then I think we'll have a go at the audience. So please indicate if somebody wants to say something. I can't see from here, so somebody else hopefully sees it.
Yeah, I won't go into the defense of professors, everybody.
Oh, you should.
It's fairly
Somebody
familiar.
somebody needs to defend them too.
No, that also, I mean, but to say that these sort of let's say the intellectuals also have an interest in their own interest, I think that's fairly understandable, but not very good. So, but I think what this points towards, I think, is the importance of who are the stakeholders and the rights holders in this. And in that sense, saying those having a cabin are not as important stakeholders as the people, the inhabitants of each community. This is something that needs to be stated, and where you that it may be an unpopular decision or a statement, but it's clearly important. But again, that level of who are the rights holders, who are the stakeholders in this, and who are those who just find things convenient, is an important distinction, I'd say. So.
Okay, then we have a voice from the audience. Please introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah, okay. Misunderstanding.
Okay, a very small voice from the audience. So nobody wants to have a go? Okay, and then we continue on. So, listening to the many debates or discussions, we're going to solve this because we need to solve it. It seems a little bit, if not empty, I'm getting a little desperate to see where will the transition actually happen. How will it start to accelerate? Because that it's going to happen because it needs to happen. It's not an argument in itself. So please. Okay, Maja, Torjard getting a...
So I'm going to tell you what's going to happen.
Oi! You should have been there the first day.
In September 2025, this country is going to get a new government. And the head of that government may as well be a person who does not believe in the Paris Agreement, who does not believe that climate change is man-made, who does not believe that we need to do the greening of our industries, and who is opposed to European Union. So this is going to probably happen in Norway. We need to kind of be prepared for that, each and one of us in this room, that the voters have this last decision, and they are currently not happy with the amount of public spending on green deals of different kind. So I believe that the Norwegian efforts towards fulfilling our commitments to the Paris Agreement, our commitments to the European Union, are going to take a huge couple of steps back. So I don't know if you want to lose faith on the back of that information, or if you're going to kind of fight on with better information and better dissemination of knowledge. And also it depends whether Geringa's party is the biggest party or the Progressive Party is the biggest party.
It was Torjard and then Geringa, was it so? Or Mona?
Well, I could be, since Maja is so pessimistic, I'll take on the optimist tone in this sense. I think that some reasons to be optimistic about this is that there is a change in industry. I mean, we see especially local companies trying to build what they do on dialogue and of free, prior, and informed consent as basic rules. And I think industry may even overrun parts of some of the political ideas, saying that it's so important with the green transition that we will move on with it, because we also earn money from doing that. At the same time, being optimist, there is a good reason that the fights for recognition of indigenous people's rights and human rights, they win through, and that will change part of these processes, and that we get more, that we get better research, and that research that will be recognizing knowledges from different sectors. So in that sense, we could be quite optimistic.
But not within the time frame of the Paris Agreement.
No.
Yeah.
I'm either pessimistic or optimistic. I'm realistic. Of course, this will not happen by itself. It's not happened by political speeches. It has to be done hardcore investments to solve this problem. And I agree. The industry which has to put the yellow shirts on and go forward, and they already do that. But anything has to be solved by capacity on the net. Without having the possibility to have the green new renewable energy to the end point, you cannot change the way of the industry is working. And the industry is clever. They do what is feasible and reasonable and sensible. So I think it will happen. Maybe not as fast as we should wish, but in the future there will be. I think we will reach these goals.
In our municipality, Tromsø has taken a pause in the development, and I think you have wartime and you have peacetime. So you have to use the peacetime as well to get in dialogue with Sami people to talk about how to coexist and to develop the local community when it's not an actual development happening. So you have to have a playbook, played by some rules, and I do understand the distrust, I really do. But sometimes you have to make some rules to play by. So when we have things like this happening, how are we going to have the dialogue? How are we going to talk to each other? And when it's peacetime, it's the best time to do that.
Okay, we were about to conclude this panel, and I think I'm going to throw away the rest of my manuscript because no war in peacetime was mentioned. You made predictions on what will be the upcoming government this autumn, and as I understood you could foresee it coming from how to say, extreme in the sense not being centrist, with indicating maybe a progressive party prime minister. Okay, so here to the two politicians, to the political editor, and of course the professor needs to weigh in. Isn't this the time for Norway to actually have a centrist government? The Conservatives and Labour stepping up to the plate together, having a government. Will we just take it from Mona to Torja?
What the media writes and what I experience in who we are collaborating with is often two different sides of the story. I'm in the Labour Party. My father was from the Conservative Party.
Oh, things have changed.
Yes, things change, and maybe this could have been a possibility for me, but that is far right as I would go.
Thanks.
I agree. In my municipality, I am cooperating very well with the Labour Party. So why not also in the national politics?
Maja?
I'm going to write that.
No.
I think that this is an issue for both of these, what we call them, styringspartier, the governing parties that are kind of responsible parties in Norway, that they often partner up with populist parties on each side of the aisle. So this current government, as long as we have it, is with the Central Party, which is, that party is against European Union, while the Labour Party is for-ish. They can swing both ways, but mostly for. The Conservative Party and Progressive Party are the same deal. So if the European Union gets on the table after the September election, you will have the same issue with these kind of big differences. In general, it would be, no problem. In Denmark, they're doing it. Social Democrats collaborating with Conservatives, all in the spirit of stability and safety for the people. So I don't know.
Okay, so to our most stable panelist, Torja.
Well, I said that when it comes to who should sit in government, I will not make an opinion. But I think what we do see that on local level, collaboration often works. And I think there's times call for collaboration, however it is in the shape of the government and so on. But I do think that what we always need to remind ourselves when there's a big consensus in society, there's always what happens with the minority rights. They're always contested when there's the big majority controlling. So that's my last sort of warning in this sense.
So thanks a lot, guys. It was fun. Thank you. So please, if you just exit that way. Okay, so then we're zooming out a little bit towards the national and international level of things, maybe more the industry perspective as well. So I welcome to the stage Eirik Frantzen, CEO of Nordkraft, please. Hilde Rød, Senior VP for Climate and Sustainability, Equinor. Kai Simon Eikli-Juan, Chair of Arctic Economic Council and Advisor to the Norwegian Shipowners Association, please. Claude Veroreville, EU Special Envoy for Arctic Matters. And finally, a professor, Andre Tvinnereim of the famous University of Bergen. Yeah, so we're going to welcome. We're going to start as we started with the previous panel. Same question to all of you. And you reflect as you think. Andre, you will be excused for this one. I'll take you in later. So you're all in public positions. We're considering facts and public opinion, and communicating or acting on these at the national or international level is at the very core. So can you reflect a little to the audience what's particular with your part in your roles, or even personally, in this, the license to operate? So if we start with Mona and we just take it towards me.
Hilde, yes.
Hilde, sorry.
Thank you.
But I didn't confuse the Finnish and Swedish State Secretary.
Yes. That's fine. No, I think there was a lot of talk also in discussion in the previous panel around sort of avoiding polarization, and I think I represent Equinor, so energy company, oil and gas, etc. So for me, it's important to discuss in a way all aspects of transition and energy transition, but really the aim is to try to both install sort of a sense of urgency and motivation for change. And I spend a lot of time talking about this, not only externally, but also internally, because we have a lot of employees, more than 20,000, and most are very, very engaged on this topic. And we need to discuss this also to really motivate employees for change in the transition journey that we are on. But for me, it's sort of the sense of urgency, but I also spend a lot of time trying to get balance into the discussion. Of course, oil and gas companies, energy companies have a very important part to play, but we all do, and we're in this together. So being fact-based, being transparent, both about our emissions, our role in this, the challenges, the dilemmas, etc. But also discussing some of the dilemmas, or even trilemmas, as we call it, of you know, why do things take time? Why is transition challenging? The importance of energy security, of really affordability of energy, and reducing emissions at the same time, and not isolating the climate perspective or that debate into only emission reduction discussion. We need to solve for more. And energy is actually, it's not a luxury commodity. It's something we all need and use every day. So you need to solve climate without, but with still having stable energy supply. And that's really my job. So trying to be transparent and balanced.
Eirik?
In Europe, approximately 85% of the consumption is fossil. In Norway, it's less than 50. So the situation in Norway is quite different in this area. And we are a nation based on raw materials. It's fish and oil, but don't forget electricity. And we are exporting electricity. If you take the north part of Norway, we export 50% of what we produce. We produce 50% more in average compared to the rest of Norway. So if I take the point of Geringe, I think one of the big things for Norway and north part of Norway is to create a new industry on this green energy. And that's good for environment, it's good for the municipality, it's good for the nation, it's good for the north. So I think that's the main thing, to create new industry based on a renewable.
Kai?
Thank you. So I have two hats here. I represent the Arctic Economic Council, which is a business-to-business organization, pan-Arctic, promoting responsible economic development. And I also represent the Norwegian Shipowners Association. So we have 130 Norwegian ship owners who are members. But for both of these, I think I can say pretty much the same as the two other speakers here, that we need to balance these different imperatives. The imperative of a green transition, of creating jobs, of local communities and the rights of indigenous peoples, etc., while also having the imperative of commercial viability.
But how much is this about how you operate, and how much is it about how you communicate it?
Well, it's both. They're obviously connected. I think license to operate has to be there from the beginning. I think that's what we preach. Of course, the current situation that you've alluded to with household power, electricity prices, etc., is that an imperative? I don't know. That's a bigger discussion, I think. But at the end of the day, our job is to facilitate understanding and dialogue. And to do that, we also share best practices, etc. So we try to include everyone and to promote the interests of our business members in that fashion.
So Claude, seeing it maybe a little bit from a distance, even being here.
Thank you very much. I want to start with a digression. I'm the only foreigner in this panel and in the other panel on energy. And for all things, I'm the EU. So I'm a bit the red herring of this panel, or the elephant in the room, you choose. But what I want to say is I've listened very carefully to the debates before and now, and what I've seen is an impressive dialogue. It was thoughtful, there was a lot of empathy, and a lot of humor. So it's a very good start, and as you said yourself, what about action? Now, its action is licensed to operate, right? Everybody says balance, and I fully agree, balance and complementarity, I would add. So balance, I mean, if you want your balance to be better balanced, you'd better have two legs. And the two legs of our legislation is we started with the Green Deal, we're now on the Clean Industrial Deal. Basically, we're talking balance between competitiveness and decarbonization. And it's complex.
Oh.
It's extremely complex. Should we go faster? Faster on licenses? Yes, but not that fast, that we don't take the time to consult the locals, for example. Should we review our state aid acts to make it more adjustable to this new kind of market? Should we open the market, protect the market? This is the whole debate that is going on in the EU. And we have this new move on the Clean Industrial Act, but it's not sealed completely. Myself, we don't know what is exactly in it, because there's still a bit of work in progress. And Norway in this, where is that? Norway is
I think
very integrated.
we're going to get back to
Yes.
that part. So all of you, was there anything in what Andre introduced with that particularly resonated with you, or you wondered about?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to recognize, and I think in general, everyone wants the green transition, but preferably not in their own backyard, and that's a very sort of global issue, and you find it anywhere, and it's very understandable. But I think, and I think that's also something we recognize in a way. So it's very easy to point to everyone else, whether it's a particular industry sector or whether it's another part of the country, or someone else needs to do the job. So I think it's very recognizable, but also very understandable.
Yeah. So talking about action or even reaction. So Eirik, your power production company, Nordkraft, you have been very vocal for the Arctic energy transition, including collaboration with the industry development, or at least visions for it. But no, presently all bets seem off.
No.
What is happening?
Of course, something is going later than you wish, but I don't feel it that way. I will say that local acceptance is one of the main things. If you take Norway as a nation, or north part of Norway, it's really important to not become an oil platform where we are commuting in with people and exporting energy. So you need local societies and local acceptance. That means short-tripped production. So we are working with wind in Finnmark as a result of Melkøya.
Yeah, but
because then
Melkøya it will be a huge customer, but to me it's very specific, so I'm not sure if it's representative for the discussion we need to have.
The new verticals, for us it has been 3. Hydrogen is one of them. Off-take hydrogen in Europe is quite late. The other one is battery, upstream battery, not selling, but upstream battery. And you can see all the battery in the Nordics. I mean, in Sweden you have Northvolt, in south part of Norway we have Morrow and Freyr. It's quite, all is Southeast Asia now. So it's quite different for Europe with battery. But the third value, I would say, vertical, is digital industry.
Yeah. Okay, but let's get back to the hydrogen. So if I understood correctly, Melkøya aside, hydrogen production is the second thing that's envisioned in the need of the increased power production here north. But where are the customers for all this hydrogen?
It has to be in Europe.
Ship owners will
okay, please elaborate.
No, so our business, right, shipping, so we essentially have different segments here. We have the ships that transport cargo inside of Europe, inside Norway, or intercontinentally. And we also have the offshore service fleets. That's the third largest offshore service fleet in the world is Norwegian.
But are you in sync with current visions and plannings here? So whenever
we
these
have
guys
ships,
start to
we
produce
have ship
hydrogen,
owners.
You will be there with the ships?
We have ship owners buying ships or taking delivery of ships today that run on hydrogen and ammonia. So it's happening. My message there would be that it's not about technology. We have the technology. That part is easy, actually, compared to the rest. The issue is more about regulations and having both the carrot and the whip, so you can have a price on emissions and to reinvest that revenue into reducing the cost gap between these fuels, because these fuels are more expensive, and ship owners will not give you a green transition with red numbers.
So going a little bit back to you, Hilda, I don't really mean it, but sometimes you could say that it seems that Norwegian confuses Equinor with the state or the government. At least we put much expectations both in your income in general and also what you do and how do you do it. So you find that particularly challenging as a company or in your job, or is it sometimes maybe even, I don't know, helpful or a driver? Can you reflect a little bit on that?
Yeah, well, I think there is an element of that, and I think you can also find that outside of Norway, that the two are mixed up, but we are definitely not the same. But I do think it's natural that there are high expectations to Equinor, in particular in Norway. We're, after all, the largest company by far in the country and visible, and we've also stated our ambitions within transition, and then we have technology, we have very competent people and financial muscles, etc. So I think, of course, there are expectations, and we have high expectations to ourselves as well. But I think what we also try to explain is that we need to have two thoughts in our head at the same time. We need to sort of be the stable energy producer and deliverer of gas to Europe that Europe needs, and we need to focus on emission reductions while we do that, while we are building the business of the future. And doing those two at once it's challenging, and it is for all companies, I think, performing today and then investing in the future. So that's a balancing act, and I think a lot of companies experience the same, finding the right balance there.
So anybody else in the panel want to comment whether we put too much expectations or confuse Equinor with being something else?
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. They have all the skills and they have all the resources to really go ahead.
But Kai, so wearing both your hats now, both for an Arctic collaborative organization and maybe the most global thing we have, the ship owners organization, what would you say is particularly relevant for the Arctic, or particular to the Arctic, for this license to operate?
Well, I would think, to make it short, I'd say just two things. I mean, number one is the environmental sensitivity in this area. That's extremely important. And the other thing would be so the stakeholder dialogue, in particular with indigenous peoples. And here, I think the stakeholder, I mean, businesses have a stake. We can earn money. You know, local communities, people who own their summer houses, they have a stake. You know, but then there are people who have rights, and that's a different thing. So you need to have them on board and to integrate that into the business models. So we have, for instance, you know, Arctic Economic Council has made guidelines for environmental impact assessments for the Arctic. We have an Arctic investment protocol, so guidelines on how investors should relate to the Arctic, because, I mean, I was surprised to learn that a number of the largest banks in the world have a policy to not invest in the Arctic. That's not good for anyone. Nobody wants that.
But is this then an example of something you actually identified and know it kind of works and improving, or is it what you put on the table for something that we need to dig into now?
So I think it depends on the level of activity, and I think you're alluding to that, the fact that the activity may be going down a bit, which may be true, but it's also the fact that, you know, we are a pan-Arctic organization, and the pan-Arctic dimension right now, because of security policy and geopolitics, is tricky.
Just a very short comment also to Kai's comment. I think we see the same around oil and gas projects in the Arctic. And, you know, northern Norway, we have a lot of ongoing oil and gas production from this region. And Hammerfest LNG alone, I think, represents around 5% of the export to Europe from Norway. And it is in the Arctic, and it's necessary. But yet there are policies sort of making that more difficult, although we see a lot of similarities with oil and gas production on the rest of the Norwegian continental shelf. So I think also understanding how the differentiation between different areas in the Arctic, I think, is important.
So Claude, you were talking a little bit about the EU perspective, so what's going on in the EU. Can you try to, both from the experiences you have had here this week and also coming into this relatively new positions of yours, how does this project with the Arctic, or what is the potential interaction with what goes on in the Arctic or the Nordic countries more in general, if you like?
Well, my first hunch is we're in this together. Honestly, I mean, whether it is the dilemma of decarbonization, but we need the production, but we need low prices. What happened? This debate in Norway is the same that happens in every country of the EU, and we're in this together because we're already integrated. So again, we come back to the issue of complementarity. You said earlier we have the resources. You do. Norway has wind, Norway has water, Norway has gas, you name it, and critical raw material. Nobody pronounced the magical word of CRM, but critical raw material. But Norway has huge potential. And yes, Norway has an amazing technology. And we have the market. Don't be too complacent on your technology, because this is a race to be on top of the technology. So if we work together to improve, it's great. You want to know about the Arctic?
Okay, a little bit more, please. No, you were happy, yeah? Andra, feel free to comment, but I also have a particular question for you. So in what you have surveyed, what has surprised you the more or the most? In a national, international, or even Arctic context, and then feel free to comment on what you've heard up to now.
So I'll start with commenting on Claude's statement about, of course, it's true that Norway exports several energy commodities, fossil and renewable. But what I think is quite striking, it's not surprising as such, but there is really a big contrast between electricity as a product and gas, for example, as a product, because nobody in Norway, well, in general, gas has been exported from Norway for decades, and that's just how it is. But when it comes to exchanging electricity with the EU, with the continent, with the UK, that's highly controversial. So I think that's a really interesting contrast that we all know this is the case, and we also see it very clearly in the survey data. No, I think this is because partly, well, what Hilde mentioned about electricity being a commodity, but it's also something that we need. It's not just a thing that you can trade. It's really something that, well, it keeps the lights on. It's something we have to have. And Norwegians really like to have that at a very low price because we're used to this being basically free. And now, suddenly, a couple of years ago, it wasn't free anymore. And then people panicked. And I think a lot of what we're seeing these days is just due to the fact that we haven't adjusted to this fact that it has changed so much.
So Claude, Eirik, Kai?
I digress again and bring us back to the Arctic, which was your original question. The Arctic, it would be a fundamental mistake to only see it as a source of resource and forgetting that it's a place where some people live. This is the risk that we are confronted with these days. So yes, the Arctic is full of resources, and it's full of resources that are super challenging to extract, and many people compete to reach it. How about the people? They need to be taken into account in this talk.
Eirik, Kai, you had comments to Andre, I believe?
He mentioned it was quite controversial, this electric part, and producing renewable is a balance between footprint in the nature, it's the environment, and it's the price level. So I will feel, I'm not a politiker, but I feel there is a contract in Norway to have green and cheap electricity. There's been a contract for centuries. And when you try to exchange, that's okay, but when you're importing a different price level, that's a break to this contract and the competitive advantage and the price of nature, etc. So I understand that. And on the top of it, this export, when you're going from exchange to export, it's 10% going to heat. So instead of doing it short trip value creation, you export electricity as a raw material. So I understand this kind of sense, and I feel that's really the local acceptance, the operation, also the license to operate is to understand this picture in Norway.
Okay.
So I wanted to comment on household power prices and offshore wind, because offshore wind is, in terms of like the environmental footprint and and compared to onshore wind, it's out of sight and out of mind, you would think. But it's interesting to see that resistance is increasing. And I can only speculate as to why. Maybe it's guilty by association, that it's offshore wind and onshore wind and it's power, like hybrid cables going to Europe, etc. Or maybe it's the fact that it's seen as a very expensive, relatively expensive, and is relatively expensive to other power sources. But I find it fascinating that we only talk about the cost side. We don't talk about the other side of that equation, which for offshore wind would be, because we see it, that there's a booming offshore wind business internationally. We see it because we deliver the ships that install and maintain and service these operations. We have one of the largest fleets for that in the world. And they will go where the money is, which is currently not in Norway, but many other places. And just to give you an idea, we have an annual survey where we see what kind of ships our members are planning to buy for the next 5 years. And for the offshore fleet, where we are the third largest in the world, it looks like 6 out of 10 ships will go towards offshore wind and only 4 out of 10 to oil and gas. And if that isn't the green transition in practice, I don't know what is. And even more interestingly, Norwegian shipbuilders, Norwegian industry, is supplying a huge number of these. Let me just finish that point, because 35 billion, right, going back to that, sounds expensive. That's 35 billion in subsidies from a capital surplus state, let's not forget, over years. But on the other side, let me finish. On the other side, last year, Norwegian Energy Partners, an industry association, came with a report showing we exported ships and technology and equipment to offshore wind for 40 billion in 1 year, compared to 35 billion over years. So there is an income to this as well.
So out of my ignorance then, for these options, or how to say tentative deals being done for building ships, so what is then the timeline here? The ships are built, they go into the service of building wind parks, moving. So what time frame are we talking about here?
So these are the ships that our members intend to buy in 5 years, or over the next 5 years.
Order or have in operation?
Order. So it takes a couple of years to get them as well. But on that point, I could say that we have members who have ordered ships, which are not anywhere near delivery, but they already have full contract books for the foreseeable future. So there's a lot of activity.
Eirik?
I agree. As an industry, 1/3 or 1/4 of the demand in Norway are power-intensive industry, and they expect the price level on energy 20% of what is cost for wind offshore. So they will leave. If this will be the result, they will leave and go to Asia. Norsk Hydro, Elkem, whatever. We are today using 7 billion NOK a year to subsidize, to stay on this level we have today. So it's quite a different equation.
But is it a very, very traditional power-intensive industry that's going to take us into the end of the century and beyond?
Yeah, I think it's better that they go on green renewable in Norway instead of coal in Asia. So that's, yes, I think it's a part of it.
Yeah, but looking into the future, 2030, 2040, 2050, and of course major companies like yours, you have strategies and so on for the near future, 2030, probably Equinor have net zero still by 2050. But still, as an interesting public, you see presently the economic environment seems to halt many things. So when will you come in conflict between what you do not do or the complications you see today and still insisting on your 2030, 2040, 2050 targets? You want to have a start for it, Hilde?
Is that me? Yes.
No, not that, but Equinor has been very vocal, even in this meeting, in still keeping the net zero by 2050.
Yes, so I think we have our plans, we have our strategy. We're also very clear that we are fully dependent on also the world, changing for us to be able to do everything we want to do. But we have integrated these climate ambitions. They are very integrated in the strategy we have, and when we do our business plans every year, we test and evaluate this. So 2050 is one thing. We have milestones that are much closer in time, and I think are even more important to focus on 2030, etc. So and every year we report on progress, both on what we do on our own emission reductions, how we do on investments into renewables, low carbon solutions, etc. And next week we will have our capital markets update, and also tell more about how are we doing, what are we doing within offshore wind, within carbon capture and storage, etc. But of course, we cannot exist sort of totally in isolation from market forces. So we have to both sort of look at long term, but of course adjust the course and roads as we go. And it will be a bumpy road probably, and some years you will accelerate more, and other years it will be more difficult. So I don't think we should expect sort of a straight line.
No, but 2030 is getting so close that you pretty much need to get straight to the target now. You can't detour too much. So what do you think about that?
2030, I would say next week you can get our progress report, and then you can make up your own judgment.
Okay, you look optimistic at least.
No conflict, but there is some border. It has been mentioned. The grid is one of them. We are using less than 40% of the grid today, and we need to invest a lot in the grid. So and why do we need? Because it's 7 to 20 cold days a year, including Christmas. So we need to dimension the grid to this. So one crazy idea, for example, in Hammerfest, Equinor are now putting down the gas-fueled power plant, which is 400 megawatt. Let's say that we invested together in this power plant and keep it in Finnmark and producing 10 days a year, 20 days a year, then we don't need all this grid. So that's one idea. It costs some money for Equinor, but it's quite less compared to the alternatives. So grid, and we need to create a new model for grid, because it will become really expensive if not. So that's one example. Decentralized power plants.
I completely agree that grids are really important. We haven't done a lot of work on grids yet, but certainly interconnections are really important. But of course, then once you interconnect, you get price levels that are the same. I think for economic and environmental reasons, there are very good reasons to do that. But this is something that is spurring the controversies. So I think going forward, so Norway is, as Hilde said, an open economy. Usually, when there is competition from abroad, that leads to dislocation domestically in Norway. So there are two ways to do that. Either you put on tariffs or you just ban trade. That's what big countries can do. Norway has never really done that. What Norway usually does is to compensate domestically and keep the economy open. So I think that will still be our best bet in the future most of the time. But I am very intrigued by how this is not really happening when it comes to electricity, because when it comes to electricity, it's really about protectionism in Norway, and not just in Norway vis-a-vis the rest of the world, but inside of Norway, so that people in Stavanger, they will just have to pay those high prices because people in north of the Sognefjord can have more or less free electricity. So to me, this is a big, well, it's very fascinating as a social scientist to study.
Yes, anybody else of you? Is it just because of history we don't consider electricity as a resource, as other resources?
It's also the amount. I mean, it could be quite warm inside and cold outside. And if you open the window, it will become a little bit warmer outside, but really cold inside. I mean, not part of Norway.
So
10%
is
of
the
Norway,
outside and
it's 2% of Europe. So, I mean, it's the scale.
I think Norwegians we are used to having, clean energy and cheap energy, and therefore I think there is also a potential on the energy efficiency side, because we've not been terrific on that, and that is because I think having had this renewable energy all the time also in a way has made us less concerned about the value of energy efficiency. So I think there is some historic reasons for this, and we expect it in a way, or we take it for granted that we will have abundance of clean and cheap energy.
Anybody have a go from the audience in commenting or asking a question to the panel? Please introduce yourself, and be short.
Short?
Yeah, I know you.
No, my name is Bo Anderson. I lead the Fram Center collaboration of research here, and we are starting a program on the green shift in the north. And this is about license to operate. You have not talked so much about the planned wind turbines that are planned in Finnmark, and the conflict that this has upon the Sami population. And because for me, the important thing here is the license to operate is that we have a just transition, and I do not see that you have taken very much of that into your argument. Some was in the previous panel, but I still want to know about the just transition and how we can do this. And to comment one point also, why is there not a strong will to use already gray areas? For example, roads and already industrialized areas, if you do that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think for the justice of this panel, we stick to just transition in general. The local, you had your chance with the other guys. So Andre, you wanted to start too?
I wanted to comment on the second one. So
yeah, just start.
Okay. So about the gray areas and the road, I think that's a really good question. I think we have had a model for building and siting wind turbines that has been all about optimizing output, and you want to get the best possible spots, and then you just discount everything else. So I think once we start looking at other things than just where is there the most wind, I think then we can get some compromises and roads, and you don't have to build new roads, and you already have a built-out area to it. So I think this could be coming, but this is difficult because I think wind produces more power to the power of 3 with wind speeds. Wind speed is extremely important. So, but let's see how that develops.
But Eirik, when you plan, say, wind parks, don't you have kind of a scheme of competing interests that you try to maximize on? You don't only go in.
I agree, and we have 4 of 11 initiatives in Finnmark, and of course this is a part of the balance we try to keep. So yes, but there's a lot of things you can do. We also have big-scale hydro. No one speaks about it. We have a reservoir. If you increase the height of the reservoir a little bit, then you have a lot of energy. So it's a lot to do in Norway.
You know, I think the comment or question is of course spot on. It's around how do you get social acceptance for projects. We do not have any onshore wind projects in Norway, so I can't speak for that specifically. But of course, this is also a topic for offshore wind developments, although maybe a bit less controversial and contagious. It's still relevant in coexistence with fisheries, for example. And I think, early engagement and trying to find ways to coexist with other industries and also balancing with the nature side. And we see increased expectations in many countries around, nature positive approaches and methodologies where you really need to also work very hard on the biodiversity side to minimize and mitigate and maybe even, compensate with other measures. So I think we will see a lot of expectations on this, but then just transition also looks a bit different places in the world. I think there is also a sort of south-north dimension globally to it, and in northern Norway, it means it's very focused on of course, indigenous people rights, etc. But everywhere, it's about social acceptance, and really ensuring that local communities also see the benefit of these projects.
Anybody from the audience who wants to have a final go? Okay, I think it's about to go in for landing, aiming for lunch in 5 minutes. So, for all of you, I think we start with Andre and just go to the end. So, for the license to operate, shortly, what are the, say, 3 things that needs to be reconciled to get things going? Andre, and then we take it through.
So I think we need to pay for the nature that we consume, and we need to compensate within the country when there are differences in the distribution, and I do think we need a real price of electricity in particular.
Claude?
I would say just and fair transition is one. I would say preparedness. We all at risk of complacency, all. So preparedness is essential, and dialogue and integration. I'm back with that.
I think a lot was said about consumer prices and looking back to the good old days when they were low. I think we also need to look ahead to what kind of electricity demands we will have in the future. I think that's under-communicated. I think we need to, in the maritime space, look at different industries in conjunction, because there's also balancing interest between different industries. So shipping and offshore wind and oil and gas and fisheries, etc., can all be in conflict with each other. And currently we're planning for all of those separately. So there needs to be a more holistic approach there. And there was a very good panel on marine multi-use earlier at this conference, which you should check out if you're interested.
Increased focus on decentralized models, where it's short trip distance between production and use. Increased focus on local exception, which is part of the first. And third, I would say the grid, the bottlenecks. Anyway, we need to solve the bottlenecks, the infrastructure.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I actually think there's a need to reinforce again why is transition needed, because that seems to have become a little bit lost over the last few years, or that status quo is not an option really. That also brings more acceptance, and then I think it's very much about the processes and having a meaningful way of doing engagement and finding solutions together and avoiding this very polarized debate that tends to come up in when we talk about these themes.
So, thank you, panel. Thank you, first panel. Thank you, audience. Thank you all.